Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Saltsmith is the brainchild of Simon Lawry and David Ball, two friends with a vision to show Australian consumers what's possible with a rasher of bacon. While working full-time jobs, the two have harnessed Simon's hobby of making charcuterie to commercially produce bacon, chosen out of personal interest and early customer feedback. Now, around 3 years later, the pair produced 3 types of commercial Streaky bacon, including one in collaboration with the Starward Distillery. So that we can keep the lights on as a company, I'd like to share with you, it's called Access Collins. They're the only fully integrated end-to-end system on the market for comprehensive booking and event management. Their platform is helping operators increase foot traffic, maximize revenue, tackle no-shows, and save many hours each week through automation. Find out more at bit.ly/hospo sponsor. Hello and welcome to the show, Simon and David. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on and hear about your journey. We've started having a bit of a chat just before the interview today about Saltsmith, and I'm excited to open that up and share with listeners a bit about your respective backgrounds. And you're both two very intelligent guys from really different industries. So excited to get that out and share how you've come together to create this brand, Saltsmith, and the work that you're doing. So thank you for joining me. But without further ado, I might open into the first question, which is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I might actually just put it to the floor for each of you.
Thanks for having us, James. Really appreciate it. My crazy hospitality story is from when I was about 20, working a summer job with where my parents lived back in New Zealand, just as a waiter and working with in a restaurant by the beach, and happened to be working with a particularly grumpy English chef who liked to have a good time outside of work. I can't remember exactly what it was that I did or I said, but something really pissed him off, and I was in the kitchen, and he decided that it was a good idea to give me a bit of a warning, and so he grabbed the can of spray oil and a lighter. He started chasing me with basically a homemade flamethrower through the kitchen and then through the saloon doors into the dining room. And he stopped on the other side of the doors, but the flames certainly followed me out into the dining room, to the surprise of quite a few of our diners. That's my crazy hospo story.
Goodness, and we have heard of on the program some chefs who've gotten a little bit upset like that in a few stories that have come out over the years, but we won't linger on that one as well. But David, do you have a crazy story, crazy or exceptional experience to share, David?
Yeah, so I was working as a ski lift operator actually in America. We got to work and we were told that we had a VIP guest on the mountain. And because I was Australian and couldn't really ride very well, they always put me on the first lift. At about 10 o'clock, I had all these guys in black amassing around me that were all quite bulky. And then all of a sudden, out of kind of a black SUV appeared Michelle Obama and her 2 kids. And it was my job, as they were the lift lines were parted, and I had the Secret Service standing on either side of me while Michelle got on with the head ski instructor. One of the girls, as she kind of approached the line, fell over. And at that point, I'd been obviously working as a lift operator for a while, but very unsure with about 6 Secret Service personnel around me that I had to quickly grab her and pick her up and put her on the lift. They were all taking off. As I kind of finished it, one of the Secret Service guys grabbed me and turned to me and said, "That was really well done." And I was like, oh.
Wow, what a story as well.
A real nerve-wracking situation to be in.
Goodness, well, thank you. Very different kinds of experiences there as well, but I'm glad to hear you're delivering exceptional service there, even out on the ski lift. As you know, the next question that I ask is about why you do what you do. So what it is that really inspires you I might actually look at together. I'm sure you have some sort of common purpose or common why behind Saltsmith. And I know that you're still also both working day jobs, as a lot of entrepreneurs do. What is it that's really brought you together, that, this common denominator that has inspired you both to create the brand that you have?
There's two things. One, I think, is that we both want to escape this idea of trading time for money. And I think someone else that you've interviewed has had that similar kind of thing, that the idea of working the 9 to 5 and that kind of thing. And that's part of it. But we also want to just create something that is exceptional, that is really high quality, and that brings people together. And hospitality and food, for me, is really about the moments that we share with other people. And really high quality products facilitate those moments where people make that connection over a exceptional little experience that they have in this 3-second window that opens them up into another world. So I think that's really at the core of what we want to create.
And so individually, have you had some separate purposes, separate whys, or factors that really inspire you on your own before coming together? David, have you got something that drives you that's different to that individually, and coming and working together with Simon, that's this common denominator? Or because a lot of founders have different purposes behind them, but I'd love to hear what you've got to say there, David.
Kind of mimicking a few of what Simon said. The why for me was, bringing joy to people through. So I actually was a gin distiller for 9 months there. Seeing people for the first time try the spirit and just be amazed at it, at what it could do to that, and then the social conversations around that as well. That industry, that wasn't for me, but I think kind of the same thing, bringing it back to food and also spirits for us, was that Simon and I really connected over trying a really good whiskey and having that moment of, that's good, that's amazing, and all the conversation that comes out of that. But yeah, providing that little bit of joy through food.
Fantastic. So what I might do now is just ask you a bit more while you're on a roll there, David, to tell us about Saltsmith and what the brand is, a bit about your products, and what you are doing together with Simon.
Saltsmith is high-end bacon. We looked at the market, and what we found was that people weren't looking at bacon and doing as much as they could with it. My kind of example for all of this was ice cream. It was about 10 years ago. You just had 3 liters of ice cream. Everyone thought that ice cream was amazing. And then you had the new brands, Connoisseur, Ben & Jerry's, that came through, and they just added something extra. They reduced the tub sizes and the prices went up. That was fine, but the quality was there. And then people went, oh my God, this is what ice cream could be. And we kind of had the exact same thought around bacon. Simon had been doing charcuterie for 7 years, and every time we got together at a holiday house, he would bring a kilo of bacon, and we would be like, this is fantastic. We couldn't understand why the other bacon wasn't like this, why people weren't making this type of product. Like, with his back knowledge of it all, it came to be that, it was like, how do we do this? How do we get this to people? And part of that was using the older traditional methods of dry curing and cold smoking to impart that flavor into the product and to push it. We have a classic Streaky bacon product, but we also then started moving into the 4-pepper and the maple whiskey type products, and really showcasing what could be done in this sector, where you've probably always had just a butcher, and a butcher obviously does bacon, but they also do a range of other meat products, but nobody seemed to just be focusing on bacon.
And you mentioned the maple whiskey. So tell just a little bit about who you are working with to actually make that maple whiskey bacon.
We've been extraordinarily privileged to have a really close working relationship with Starward for a really long time. And so we use Starward's twofold in that product. So we dry cure the product in there. It sits in a blend of Canadian maple syrup and a twofold whiskey for about a week. And all of those flavors just soak in. Based on some existing relationships that we had with Starward, we actually managed to have that product at launch when we started the company last year. And as far as I'm aware, it's the only permanent partnership that Starward have with another producer. We're really, really proud of that relationship. And a great supporter of ours.
Fantastic. And it's a small world there because you mentioned Twofold. I interviewed David Vitale the day after the Twofold launch. I got flown down and went to the distillery there. So it's interesting a while on after launching that Twofold that now it's being used in another brand with another couple of guests on the program. So a small world there and nice to re-interact with Starward in the process. While I've got you answering that question there, I might actually ask you more about the backstory and how you came to do what you do with David. You do very different things, and I'm going to pull that out a little bit. But if you can just tell us about how you actually met and came to create this brand, because, who thinks of a bacon brand and how did this actually come up?
Dave and I met probably 13 or 14 years ago in Brisbane, and we met at a entrepreneurship conference. Back then, that was kind of an odd thing to have a conference about, particularly in Brisbane. It was relatively small. There were about 20 people there. I only knew one other person, and everyone kind of sat down and just started chatting and talking, and everyone really got along, and no one really understood that no one knew each other. And so out of that weekend, some really, really strong friendships were formed, and the strongest one for me was with Dave. And we've been friends now for close to 15 years, and most of that time, we've never lived in the same city. I think we've probably done a third of that in the same city. And Dave's traveled to the UK and the US and spent a lot of time overseas. And whenever he would come back, I'd go and visit him and we'd spend time together and we'd talk about our lives. And we just had this really close friendship. And over time, once Dave moved back to Brisbane, we organised a holiday in Fiji for my birthday. And so we went over there and we're having a good time and just talking about stuff and life and what we were doing, and between scuba diving and quad biking and having cocktails at the bar on an island, just decided that it was time to give it a crack. We knew that we were quite different people in terms of our skill sets and how we think, and we realized that that would always work really, really well together, and we had the foundation of a really, really strong friendship. So off the back of that trip, Dave made the call to move down to Melbourne, and we started looking at what business that we would start together would be. And we didn't land on bacon to start with, even though, I was doing the charcuterie and bringing bacon when we went away and all that stuff. I'm a designer by education, trade and practice. We started with how can we actually bring high quality education to designers. And we started building relationships with academics and with universities and ARC-funded research centres to try and look at how we could facilitate bringing training to designers in a way that was from really, really experienced practitioners in the academic disciplines, with establishing the relationships, but we couldn't find a way to make it work commercially. And we eventually decided that we needed to pull the plug on that. And we were looking at doing something different. And at that time, Dave and I were going to the flight nights at Starward. One of the ones we went to was a whiskey and tea pairing. I think we went to a whiskey and cheese pairing, and there might have been like a whiskey and pastry pairing. And through that process, we got talking to the guys there at Starward about a whiskey and bacon flight event to fit in with that kind of program that they were running. And we brought bacon in and we did tastings with them and tried to pair whiskeys and all that stuff. And they were really, really keen. And we were good to go. And then the hospo manager kind of said, how are you guys making this? And is this done commercially in the right kind of environment? And I had to say, I'm just making this stuff at home in my fridge with a kitchen out the back and a barbecue, smoking it and that kind of thing. And they were like, okay, well, unfortunately, we can't go ahead because we're a commercial operation and that's just not going to fly. And so we kind of sat down and went, well, A, that sucks, and B, what do we do? And so that was the point at which we actually decided that we were going to do this and form this business. And there were a couple of different ways we were looking to potentially bring this to market. So this idea of bacon and spirit pairing. And one of those was a venue, and another was on-site manufacturing with other partners so that they could serve it on site. And the third option was to actually go down the process of establishing a facility where we could produce it commercially. And that's the option that we ended up choosing. So we decided to figure out how to build a butcher shop, how to get it licensed, and how to then produce bacon. And so that's the genesis of the business. And Starward is a really, really important part of that that story, and we probably wouldn't have done it without that experience.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a bit of a jump, and I'd like to understand your thought process there. You said you were going along to those various nights at the distillery. But what made you pick bacon? What was it about that made you go, oh, bacon's the thing? You could have done various other meats, like you've been dealing with charcuterie, you said making charcuterie boards. What was it that made you go, bacon's the thing that I want to do?
You can make a whole lot of stuff with charcuterie. I've done Coca-Cola, guanciale, Spanish-style jamon, done the whole butcher half a pig in your living room and cure it kind of thing, right? Average Australian couldn't name a whole bunch of different charcuterie cuts. Bacon has a place in most Australians' hearts. There is a place in our food culture that is bacon. It's a cornerstone of breakfast for a lot of people, or a brunch. And we have free range eggs. We've got really high quality eggs. And there's been a kind of a movement around that. And there's been a movement around really, really high quality bread with sourdough. If we talk about bacon and eggs on toast, you've got those two pillars, but you aren't seeing the same thing with bacon. And there isn't that innovation and that kind of narrative in the public eye around quality there. So it was really quite an easy decision to go, that's the thing to produce. And then if you flip the coin and just look at it commercially from a business sense, when you're producing charcuterie, well, you need to dry cure, but you also need to dry age. And what you're looking for when you're dry aging is essentially weight loss. And what you're doing is you're reducing the amount of moisture in a muscle or a sausage so that the flavor is concentrated. There's two elements there. One is the time that it takes to do that. And full legs of ham, you're talking about 12 months plus. I'm on up to 27, 28, 29 months. That's a long time for it to be sitting in a curing chamber, not making you any money. The other side of that, which is what you put into that curing chamber, might have been 2 kgs and you paid 35, 40 bucks for that. When you bring it out, it's weighing 1.2, 1.3. And so the cost equation becomes unpalatable when people don't understand quality in that space.
Thank you for fleshing out that background information as to, a bit about the economics of bacon as well. And I might take the next question to David. Given that you have spent a lot of time overseas, how did you navigate working in a completely different country to your co-founder to this business? A lot of founders do like to be physically in the same space. And I'm sure there are some listeners out there who have also had similar experiences working completely remotely from each other. But how did you navigate that, given that it was in those early days when often you do need a lot of contact, whether it's physically or via video or phone call? How did you navigate that?
Simon and I were kind of separate for the friendship and would keep in touch. But for Saltsmith itself, I made the decision to move to Melbourne. And I think that part of your question was the reason is that we realized we needed to be physically in the same space. I would struggle exactly to think how we would have achieved what we achieved if that wasn't the case. Because obviously in kind of a current COVID times, we've had to adapt to a lot more phone calls. But beforehand, I think that's it, sitting down and having a face-to-face conversation about certain aspects of the business has been fundamental to what we do, is catching up weekly. Even now when we try and minimize our crossover, setting aside that time to have the weekly conversations is fundamental to our business. We need it.
Fantastic. I'd like to know what you're learning about or exploring. Like, where is the industry in bacon innovating at the moment? You talked about a little bit. It's essentially sort of a craft movement in bacon. You said eggs did the same thing. I'd like to know where the bacon industry is evolving currently.
Again, from our point of view, the free range market, we get a lot of feedback, has not really had much of an uptake within bacon. The way that I guess other people look at it is the different styles of cuts, in that they have a streaky, they have a loin, a full rasher, and people are kind of trying to distinguish from the different cuts of meat. And I guess my most recent experience in innovation, with some quotation marks around it, was having microwavable bacon that tastes like pan-fried bacon. Following on from Simon, the quality conversation hasn't really been addressed, we feel.
the thing that's happening in the industry at the moment is really a turn to Australian products, and all fresh pork that you get is basically guaranteed to be Australian. But as soon as you turn to ham and bacon and small goods, that goes out the window. And the ABC published an article on Saturday, and they state in that article that 70% of ham and bacon in Australia is made from imported pork. Most people aren't aware of that when they're purchasing. And when you start to look at the numbers there, it's staggering that we're importing as a country 3.35 million kgs of pork a week for the production of ham, bacon, and small goods. And when you talk about husbandry and animal welfare and all that kind of stuff, which is really important, when you don't even know the country it's coming from, you can't even begin to kind of understand what those practices are. So there is a big turn towards Australian products made by Australian producers.
So there are 3 different products you've got. What has actually gone into the process into developing those products and how they are distinctly different? Maybe what are you working on next?
Yeah, so a cornerstone of what we do is quality, and then another one is experimentation and innovation. And so those 3 products, we've got our breakfast bacon, which we talk about as our traditional streaky, which is essentially sugar and salt, and then we cold smoke that on peachwood. So we went through probably 5 or 6 iterations of that to get those levels just right, to get the flavor that we wanted, not too salty, not too sweet, and just something that someone who was new bacon would be relatively familiar with and purchasing and comfortable with. Then we kind of went from there. What happens when we go either side of the spectrum? I was actually playing with a pepper product or a pepper-based bacon for quite a while. And it's actually where I first connected with Dave Vitale. I met him at an event after a conference called Pause Fest down here. And we got talking and he invited me to the distillery. And so I went out to the distillery and took some bacon and we cooked bacon on a sandwich press and drank whiskey and did some pairings out there. And our 4-pepper product is an evolution of that product that I took out to David at Essendon Fields before they moved. And this is where we start to go, what can we make bacon into? How can we push it as far as it can go? So we started playing with pepper and really looking at what flavors we could create when we started to mix different types of pepper. And so our pepper blend is a combination of black, white, green, and pink, and not in direct proportions. We use quite a lot of green pepper in it because it's such a really beautiful, savory pepper. And so we supplement that with a bit of juniper. Again, we've made 12 or 13 different attempts at this one to get the blend just right so that it works. And then we smoke that on cherry wood. So it's still sweet because it's a fruit wood, but it's a bit more savory in its profile. It's such a big flavored bacon that it actually punches through a lot of other flavors where you might use it in food and then you don't really get that bacon taste coming through. What we've found is this can actually stand up to some of those stronger flavors and actually push that bacon flavor through. So that is our savory product, and we encourage people to use that in blats and in pasta, in those kinds of situations. And then our final product at the moment is what we call our maple whiskey. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. I mentioned it before, but that product started out as actually just a maple bacon. And we just kept finding that it was too dull. It was too boring. It was just linear in its sweetness. And we wanted to give something a little bit more to it. And that's when we went to our friends at Starward, we want to give this a crack, and would you guys support us in this? And they said, knock yourselves out, go for it, see what you can do. And so we added the whiskey, and it just gives it this other dimension, this maltiness that complements the sweetness and the maple syrup really, really well. And so that's our core range at the moment. We'll be introducing a new product specifically for retail in 6 to 10 weeks. We refer to that as our streaky bacon. That's a twist on our breakfast bacon that we think's a really good introduction to what we do. And so it's similar to our breakfast bacon in that it's just a sugar and salt, but we use a coconut sugar. And so we did extensive testing with different types of sugar to figure out what gives it the flavor that we want. And I think we're probably up to test 15 or 16 with this one. And that coconut sugar gives this really kind of caramelly rich flavor. And you compare 2 pieces of bacon that have been made the same way with the exception of different sugars, you can actually tell the difference. And it surprises me how much it impacts the flavor. And then that's smoked on red gum, so an Australian wood, a very, very powerful, punchy smoke. So it's quite a different product to our existing products. Apart from that, we've done experimentation with honey miso, with garlic, and we've got another collaboration that we're cooking up in the works that around something a little bit different, playing with some sriracha. So I'm really excited about seeing where we can take that one next year.
Yeah, very interesting. I'm wondering when you're looking at other businesses and other processes, systems, models, brands out there, who is it that you are looking to get some guidance with the direction that you should be building your brand?
There's a couple of kind of adjacent industries that we reference. One of those is coffee and what's happened with third wave coffee. There's been a massive, we all know how the coffee industry has exploded all across Australia. And there are so many producers that are on that scene now. Some of the originals, Stain Ali and Small Batch, and looking at some of the things that they did and the different ethoses that they took. 70s is another one in there. The other one that's really clear is gin, and also has exploded in the last 5 to 6 years, and some incredibly successful brands in there, obviously Four Pillars being the standout. And looking at the kinds of products that they're introducing into a market that didn't have anything like them before. So those are some of the adjacent markets and products that we're looking at. Then we're looking at other brands that are similar to ours in terms of right at the top end of their market and seeing what we can learn from them. And even if we can get in touch with people from those and learn directly from those people as advisors and start to establish some relationships there.
What are some of the things that you have taken away from those brands, some of those learnings that you've now used?
I think, again, quality. Like, quality is so, so critical. You can't put a crap product in market and lipstick on a pig, basically, to use an analogy. You have to have a good product, and then you have to have a good brand, and you have to have a story, and you also have to be authentic. You can't be what you're not. This business is a manifestation of how we approach what we do. It is really, really high quality. Other than that, there's a bit around strategy, production, partnerships. There's so much that we learn on an ongoing basis. It never really stops. And so we always have to keep looking. And we also look to the brands that we care about. And part of that's in whiskey. We're both really big whiskey fans. And looking at how the different brands that we care about do what they do and what works and what doesn't.
Do you have any people that do assist with your business and to guide you? Some people talk about mentors. There are a lot of connotations associated with the particular word. But do you have people that you work with that have maybe done some similar things and paved their own way that do guide you on that journey?
We do. And really, that's only just starting to form up as a team around us. And so we've done a lot of this by ourselves with minimal support from people with relevant experience. And there are both pros and cons to that. But yeah, we're forming a team around us now. So we've got someone in place who can provide advice and expertise from a technical perspective. So someone who's been producing charcuterie commercially for a good 15 years, and they've been looking at our processes and going, you guys are doing that in a really weird way. Why would you do that? And then you're going, oh, I've never thought about doing that like that before. That's really smart. So the technical side of it, and then there's the business side. So we're working with someone from a FMCG company, a well-known brand in the soda tonic space, and they're providing advice and guidance to us from a business perspective. So again, we're just starting that relationship and really looking forward to having that additional support that we haven't had so that we can really start tuning the business. We've gone through this process of getting to a point where we can prove that this is a product that can work and that people want, enjoy, and will pay for, to now going, how do we tighten all the nuts and bolts, figure out our processes and make this scale?
Fantastic. So then now that you're going through this stage of development and building that team, what is it that's giving your business friction currently?
Scale, really. Simon and I have pretty much bootstrapped this. And I think the couple of things was getting that team around us, getting the personnel. That's been a big one. But then there's parts of finance in terms of scaling up. And I kind of tip my hat to all those people that have bootstrapped up a company and making those decisions around production I'm mainly in the production space within Saltsmith, and even down to having enough storage space for finished product. Definitely that how to scale and how to control that growth and scale effectively without losing control of quality, obviously for us, is a major part, and dealing with the expectations of like the market and going through it and maintaining that. I was listening to your Whiskey Loot interview and about even in deliveries where I control the quality of my product, but if I give it to a courier who delivers it poorly, that reflects badly on myself. We don't want to give a whole poor service at all. And dealing with some of those issues where you don't even think about them being an issue until they are, and then trying to come around and fix all that. So that for us is the biggest thing right now.
Fantastic that you've got some big challenges that you've identified and you're working through as well. Because, I mean, to be aware of those things before they come up is an achievement in itself. So glad to hear that you have flagged some of those things. I'd like to know what success really looks like to you and to the business and how you define that.
When I think about success and how I imagine starting this business, I really comes back to that connection around people and providing an experience to people that have them connect with the people that they care about, and kind of have this image in my head around standing in a room and watching people enjoy the product that Dave and I have made, and to laugh and to have fun and to have that moment where they try it for the first time and go, whoa, this is good. And in that moment, they look at the person that they're with and they have this connection, and introducing someone to this world of what we're making is really what I care about. And we've had the privilege this year of doing bacon and whiskey flight nights at Starward, and they're just such fun events, and have a great time with the crew at Starward. And we introduce people to this world of really incredible bacon and this experience of getting to pair a bacon with a great Melbourne whiskey, or a series of great Melbourne whiskies, and play with how the bacon changes the flavour. And in some ways that starts to fulfill that kind of vision that I had around watching people really, really enjoy themselves with our product. That's not a commercial answer. That's not an answer that talks about scale or anything, but it's really why we kind of got into this, is to provide people with those really, really great moments of connection at the food.
You mentioned there the meta comment on your answer, but there's nothing wrong with that answer given that it is a young business and these sorts of metrics will evolve as time progresses as well. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that either as well. So thank you for that insight into where you're aiming as things develop, Simon, as well. I'll pass over to David for the last question first. I'll ask this same last question to each of you. David, I'd love to know who you'd like to hear on the show.
Yeah. So Simon Crowe, who formed Cocoa Black to me, or took over from Cocoa Black, reading about his story and kind of coming in, and it being, again, such an institution now for kind of coming into a failing business and turning it around for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, David. I have done one interview with Cocoa Black with Nick. I'll pass over to Simon to answer the same question just before we wrap up. Simon, who would you like to hear on the show?
We've got some really amazing producers in Australia. I think it'd be really interesting to hear what people are doing on the ground level on our farms and what innovation is happening, both at a small and large scale. And one of the names that springs to mind is Tammy Jonas from Joni Farms, and she's the chair of Food Sovereignty Australia as well. And I learnt a lot from Tammy in the early days around food production, and she's just a wealth of knowledge around small producers in Australia and the challenges they face and the things that they're trying to do to really create incredibly high quality products in Australia for Australian consumers.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much, both of you, Simon and David, for joining me on the program today. It's been a pleasure having you on, hearing about your products and the way that the business has developed, your friendship, and then bring that into, or culminating that friendship into this business together. So thanks again for joining me, and I'm excited to hear how things develop moving forward and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for having us, James.
Thanks, James.
This program is hosted by James Henderson. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, And a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.